Hello and welcome to Engaging Data Bytes. My name's Simon Meacher. I am with Engaging Data, have been for the last 6 years. And with me today, I have Ramesh from Warescape. Hi, Ramesh.
Hi, Simon. How are you doing?
Not too bad. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well.
Excellent. Right. So let's get straight into it. CI/CD, Git integration. This is becoming kind of a staple or must-have for most modern data platforms. What's your thoughts? How are you seeing things in the market? What do you think clients are requesting?
So I think there's a distinct proliferation of interest around CI/CD and having those kind of processes integrated into the development processes for our customers. I mean, we're seeing lots of them sort of coming back to us and asking us about how do we integrate with Git, how do we manage sort of branching and merging capabilities and so on. And there are some great pros on one side, and there are some challenges on the other side. So when I talk to Pat, who's one of our technical account managers, his view on CI/CD and Git integration for data warehousing is, how do you do that? I don't understand how you can version a table that exists already in a database.
Yeah.
And that's fine to a point, but I think when we look at the modeling side of things and we're constructing sort of the more abstracted views of what we're designing before they go into a physical model, then ultimately we do want to be able to create branches and merging sort of capability around that aspect of things. And also when you think about the code elements of the physicalized model, so your DML and DDL code, there's nothing to say that we shouldn't be able to branch and merge and version those aspects as well prior to physicalization. So the physical object itself is not necessarily a blocker to maintaining that kind of an operation. So yeah, that's kind of my take. I think especially when we're talking to customers that have massive distributed teams, managing an environment across that kind of an estate where you're trying to create a synchronous development environment becomes very challenging unless you can do it.
Yeah. So do you think like the older version, I mean, very much when I started out doing data warehousing, you'd have like 3 or 4 different environments, and you'd hand over the ticket to say, please take my code and move it in from development into test, and then test into QA and QA into production. Do you think that kind of infrastructure's still got a place, or is that one of the problems that you alluded to?
No, I think DQP is very necessary still. I don't think that's something that we can avoid, because ultimately you have to be able to unit test, you have to be able to regression test, you have to then performance test, and you also have to make sure that there's a cohesion between the entire across the entire model, right? So when you do hit your production environment, you need to make sure that you're not going to break anything, because that's ultimately no one wants that, right? Sorry.
No, it's fine. I mean, I was just thinking in the ways of like the older, like the old paint. Most of this grey hair was from like, okay, well, you need to roll back and you need to find the same version of data that was there beforehand. And I find that some of the more modern data platforms, the cloud platforms, things like Snowflake, can help you roll back. So data, getting a copy of historical data is less of a problem than it used to be in some of the more traditional sort of on-premise. Although some of the on-premise technologies are also offering this sort of functionality as well. So that's just one of the, I suppose I'm just sort of bringing to the surface one of my frustrations with older ways of doing it. I mean, but you mentioned about distributed teams as well. Is that something that you're finding is the CI/CD is helping a lot more?
Well, I think the CI/CD requirement becomes a lot more relevant in that type of a team hierarchy, right? Because, for instance, if you're talking about larger customers, they may have contracted supply resources, right? So external suppliers who are providing resources for development support for their environment, right? And typically in those types of scenarios, you'll find that developers are transient, right? Yeah. So let's say, for instance, you have one of our I'm not going to name names, but let's say that there's a very large consulting firm which is supplying resources to our customer. You might find that that consulting firm will only have a developer in place for, say, a couple of months, and then they'll replace them with somebody else as they move on to other projects. So, just trying to maintain that level of consistency and approach and hygiene within that type of an environment is quite difficult.
Yeah.
And so, with CI/CD, what you need to be able to do is you need to be able to make sure that there is consistency in how development standards are applied. There needs to be governance around what is approved and what is ultimately published. There has to be hygiene around, what's developed and what's removed, because it's no longer relevant, it's redundant. All of the other maintenance pieces that go alongside that, because then, you have repositories that need maintenance, you have logins, you want to be able to trace who did what, and all that kind of good stuff is really, really important in that type of large team structure. Especially in this day and age where everybody wants to be able to trace everything back to today's dot.
Yeah, I love that word hygiene. I love the way I've seen it so many times where you end up having version 1 of the model, then version 2, 3, 4, or you use dates and then you end up with 100 dates because the model's about 5 years old and you've got every single version. And I like the way that actually that's the hygiene, the housekeeping of the model can be kept, especially when you're using things like Git, because you hand over that responsibility for, like you say, the tracking and the continuous change. You hand that version control to Git, and Git does the rest for you. Exactly. It certainly helps with collaboration more, because then you can track who's doing what and where, and then clean up afterwards and make sure you've got one source of the truth.
Exactly.
And what about that collaboration piece? Sorry.
Yeah, I was actually just going to touch on that. So within the collaboration sort of environment where let's say you don't have a CI/CD structure, you don't have any kind of Git intervention or assistance in your process. So with Warescape, for instance, everything from a modeling perspective takes place in 3D, and where 3D has capabilities for creating versions and merging those versions and so on, it's very much within the construct of the repository that you're working within. And again, that repository is designed to be an operational part of the product. Okay, yeah. So it's there to manage metadata, present metadata to the user, so that user can then run model conversion rules, they can create new models and all this kind of other stuff. So, performance for the user experience becomes very important. And if you end up with this huge, sprawling, monolithic mass of a repository, all of those things are then impacted. Okay, so from minute one, your experience as a user just becomes compromised. And again, if you have people dipping in and out of that repository all of the time, and you don't know who's doing what, unless you have really good team control and sort of operational governance rather than technical governance, then it becomes impossible to manage, and you end up with this behemoth of a repo that really you don't understand anymore. Which can be very challenging.
We've covered quite a lot of this talk, and I think we're talking along the same lines as Simon Spring, and there's a video on YouTube that we're going to link to, so the guys can have a little look and carry on that thought process. But I think it's really important for us to kind of dive in and start building out a scenario and showing people how this sort of stuff can work.
Okay, I'm awake now.
Okay, so Ramesh, this is the situation. Okay, so you're a new member of my team. Okay, I'm the established developer, and you've just recently joined the company, and I need to take you through everything we've got to get you going. We're going to use CI/CD to help you get set up and get going, and 2, start working on something almost immediately. So here's our Warescape 3D environment. So we already have an existing sales system, and I can display that on screen, and you can see we already have a kind of setup, and if I display that, I can see all the relationships. We've got notes added to the tables. It's well documented as it stands. So we don't have to work on that between me and you. We can jump straight into the Data Vault. So I know you're quite new to Data Vault, he says, tongue in cheek, but as one of the newer members of the team, I could spend some time just to go through what we've done so far. So we've got our Data Vault design, and you can see we've also already got a main model. We haven't got lots of different versions. And in this main model, we already have a customer defined, we have a customer order, link table, and we have an order. So this is quite a new model. We haven't done a great deal in our design method just yet. But what we want to do is we want you to be able to pull down from the branch, build your own branch, and then start creating some changes. So one of the things I'm going to ask you to do, Ramesh, is to introduce the address and an address link table that links the customer to the address, or we could even do the no, let's do that. Let's do customer to address. So just to verify I'm all good, I'm going to commit to Git to make sure that everything that I've got on my machine is inside of Git and we're all good. Okay, everything's done. Brilliant. So now we're going to hop over to Ramesh's screen, and Ramesh is going to go into his 3D, and he's going to start the process of pulling down.
All right, so Simon, you just showed me your model and you talked me through what you want to do. If you look at my local repository, so this is now a local repository and version on my machine, you'll see that I only have, I don't have any other information other than the sales connection and the source model. And my source model is also it's not been curated. Okay, so I'm missing all the relationship information and all those other bits, as you can see here. So what I'm going to do now, just so I can synchronize with what's just been pushed back into the dev branch. So I'm going to pull, and this is now going to pull the latest version from the dev branch down onto my local machine so that I can then start working. And what you'll see is that we're pulling all kinds of other peripheral elements other than just the model to make sure that my entire environment is synchronized. So what we're going to do here is we're pulling all of the configuration elements, so anything to do with the category settings in 3D, any extended properties or model conversion rules or data type mappings, all of those things that essentially create a business rule framework within 3D for me to work with is being pulled down from the central development branch. Now, so templates and all of those kind of things as well. So what you'll see, why this is important is because we need to maintain cohesion and coherence between the various environments. And that's always been a bit tricky if you're doing it, in isolation, because you have to export those rules, you then have to send them across to somebody else, and then they have to load them up and all that kind of stuff. It becomes a very cumbersome process if you don't have some kind of automation sitting in the background, such as we have here. Now, the advantage also here of this process is that if I have to make changes to my rules, so let's say, for example, I've got an element of the model that I'm working on and I want to create a model conversion rule for that new structure that I'm developing, I can do that, and then that will also be pushed back up for inclusion in the master development environment, which means that then it becomes distributed to everybody else automatically, and there's no need to worry about whether or not we're all working off the same synchronous set of rules.
As a side note, Ramesh, it's very useful to use this if you are doing upgrades as well. So if 3D gets an upgrade, Red gets an upgrade, you can pull this down into its own siloed environment, do the pull, do an upgrade to the repository, see what happens, do your testing before you then can kind of commit to the upgrade across the estate.
Yes, exactly. That's very, very true. That's very, very true. And especially, from a testing perspective, when we do upgrades, then, making sure that there is regression testing across model conversion rules and nothing breaks in your existing production model is very, very important. So yeah, very good point. So this is just doing the red elements a moment. So what I'm going to do, I think it's actually nearly done, but I'm just going to open up 3D now anyway. At the end of this process, there is a command to open 3D automatically, but just for the sake of speed, while it's doing the red bits, I'm just going to open up 3D and move that toolbar off to one side. And so now what you'll see here is I've got all of the updated elements from Simon. So here I've got the new source model, which has all of the relationships that are in Simon's model, pulled down from the dev branch. We also now have the data vault design model, which I didn't have before, so I'm just going to expand that, bring up main, and you'll see that we now have order, customer, and customer order, and we also have a red export model, which we haven't exported to red yet, but you'll see that there is a red export model there.
So we're going to go through the process of bringing the addresses in, Ramesh, and then linking them to the customer.
Right, and let me just move this over here. So now that I'm in my model, now typically if we weren't working within a CI/CD integrated environment, we would be doing our branching and merging here in 3D, right? So typically, what I would do is I'd create a copy of this first.
That's right.
Right, and then I'd work on that copy, and then I'd end up with 2 sets of metadata around this model in my repository.
Yeah.
But that's not what we're going to do here, right? We are going to create a new branch first.
That's right.
I guess.
To do that, if you click on source and then click on the source category and then click on create branch.
Ooh.
Okay.
So, do we have an existing branch I want to use?
You want to use the current development branch. So if you select development.
Yep.
And then you can use create a name. So maybe it's Panikel's Progress.
There you go. I'm going to take out that one, and then just and that one, and maybe that one, and call it Panikel's Progress.
You can put a little dash in server space if you want, or an underscore, whichever you like.
Yeah.
And then if you click on create, so what now happens is the branch on the repository is cloned specifically for you and it's put into that branch, and you can see the name of the branch on the progress bar. So now the whole repository is resetting to be set up to communicate with that branch. So you're now separate. You've taken a copy of the entire repository, you've separated it into your own little branch, and you can go bananas with it. You can delete, add, you can do your normal day job. But the beauty of this is you're not interfering with anyone else. So whereas there may have been collaboration issues before with 2 people working on the same model, in essence, me and you can work on that one data vault model. I could do something slightly different, and then we could merge it together at the end of the day, and away we go.
And again, when we create this branch, it's creating that branch with all of the elements that I need, right? So all the category settings, all of the model conversion rules, etc., etc., etc. Yeah. This is not something we have to do continually, correct?
No.
So when I'm creating a branch is an ad hoc activity, and during the day when I'm sort of making my changes, I can commit to that branch periodically as I go through, and I can then commit elements rather than the entire model and all of the other bits that go alongside that. So I can do this in a much more atomic process rather than a full-blown every time. Well, I was just saying that interestingly, we're also creating a red build for my branch too.
Yes.
Right? So it's not just 3D, but we're trying to make sure that there's synchronicity between what we're showing in red and what we're showing in 3D for each instance.
Correct.
So I think that's important to note. So while the red build is initializing, I'm just going to open up 3D. Here we go.
So now you can check your branch, Ramesh. I mean, one of the things you can do is you right mouse button on traders and then hit information. Then inside of there, you'll be able to discover in purpose what branch you're on and what commit you're at. So if you ever need to verify and check what you've got locally against the remote branch, that's the way to do it.
That's the way to do it.
But now you're set and ready to go.
Cool. So if I display my data vault design,
there
we go. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to move this back across to here because that's what I'm going to do. I'm then going to go, what am I adding in? So if I go back to my source, I go to all tables.
Yeah. So you want to bring in the address
table.
Do I need to drag that in, drop it into the model.
So Simon, did you create any comments in here?
No, not yet, but maybe you could, and then commit some back so that I can see them.
Cool. All right. So let me just I'm going to drag address into here. Lovely. And it's down here now. There's an observation note. Haha. Haha.
So look, so that's the address. Now, just to sort of in the interest of speeding things up, I know you're new to the team, Remy.
Yeah.
So the address is linked to the customer through the order. Okay. So what you'll find in the current link table that we have, if you scroll up, you'll see customer order, and then you got sold to address. Okay. So
the order ID and the sold to address ID.
Yeah.
So this is what I'm going to be linking, right?
You can link it there. We could also build it inside of the customer table because you've got ship to address and build to address. So this is where in our data vault, we can start creating link tables with specific purposes. So we could create like a build to address as a link table. or customer build to address.
Mm-hmm.
It comes down to the way that we like to style it, and there's lots of different people who do it, have different opinions. But so we're not going to get bogged down in that too much now. But the way I like to do things is really to kind of keep it really simple. So can you copy the customer entity? The other way of doing it is just to drag in customer again from the source model, and we'll call that customer underscore bill underscore address. Okie dokie. So if we go to that new entity that's dropped in, which will probably be at the bottom of the model, and we now want to tidy this up. So it's only got the fields in it that we're interested in. So if you double click on the entity, go to the attributes. Now we need the customer key and we need the bill to address. That's the only two things that we want to keep, and all the other columns can be removed. So now once we've done that, we want both of those to be set as linked business keys. Okay.
And of course the other way to do that would be to highlight both of them and then change
it at the same time. Yeah. So now click on okay. The other thing we probably want to remove now is the relationships, because it's going to have relationships left over from it's inherited from the source system. So if you hit the relationship table, and okay, that's fine. It's just got the important one in, so that's fine. So click on apply and okay. So it's automatically it's got the one address link in there. We now need to link the business key from customer to the customer code in customer bill address. So if you go to customer, grab the customer code, or you can drag this up, which makes things a bit easier.
Right. So I'm gonna link what customer key.
Yeah. To
customer code.
Yeah.
Am I going from customer to
go from bill
address?
It doesn't matter which way you do it, because we can flip it. So if you click on OK to that to begin with.
Oh, hang on.
There we go. So then we've got a one customer key to many customer codes. But what we want to do is we want to rename customer code to customer key in the customer bill address, just to keep the naming of the fields consistent. And you can either go into the attribute and click on the rename button, click on OK, click on apply and OK. So now we have that relationship set up between customer and bill address. We want to double check the relationship that we've got, because I think we've got the other relationship that seems to be on this. Right, let's remove that from the order. So if you cancel that and then select the line that's going in from order table to customer bill address, which is just on the top right hand corner of that customer bill address entity. That's the one. And then use the delete key, or you can right mouse button on it. Okay, now we want to grab the address ID within the address table and drop it onto bill to address ID. I'll go from customer bill address to address. So you go from
many to the one.
Yes, exactly. Now what we need to do is so now you've built your link table, Ramesh, and it's as simple as that. That link table has been set up to in the next data vault part, it will start building out the link table. We do need to rename bill to address ID so it marries up with what we have in the address table. So if you go into that,
And we need to, are we going to create a satellite for this address structure?
Yeah, well that's what the address table was for. So now what we need to do is set all the attributes within the address table to build the address satellite table. So the first one you need to change. So I'd recommend the address ID becomes the business key. And then what you could do, if you want to be super quick, is select all the other attributes and change them to satellite medium
volatility, right?
Medium volatility. Then click on apply and then click on OK.
Yep.
So that's your data vault design done. So now it's up to commit. So to commit that, you hit on the commit to Git icon in the workflow.
This one here. And what this will do is it will just commit this model, right? It won't commit everything again. It will just that model.
And any relating changes. So if you've changed model conversion rules in relation to this, it will also throw the configuration set up to keep everything in line. Now Ramesh has finished using the data model. My remote version is one commit behind. But I'm on a different branch as well. I'm on the development branch. So what you could find is there could be another set of development going on, either in a separate branch. that's merged into the development branch, or directly into the development branch itself. So we could have, let's create that scenario where we're creating a link between the order and the employee. So here we have the original model, and I'm going to grab the employee and bring the employee data in here. So there we go. So I've got the employee. So I'm going to put content in here, developer note used to the employee who took the upper made transaction. Okay, so we could have meaningful information like that added into, pop that in there as well. Now you can see that I've already got lots of connections. I'm going to go ahead and delete all of those to begin with, because I want just to have the connections stood separately in my data model design. I'm also going to cheat a little bit. If I grab order again, I could bring in the order header, bring that in, and straight away that's sort of brought in all the existing connections. So I'm going to remove all of the existing relationships. Right, so now we're going to start off by renaming this entity to employee order, and this is going to be the name this here. So as you can see, created this link table, or what will become my link table. I've got the order key wrong, so the name needs to be the same as it is in order. So I'm going to rename it here, and then I'm going to drag the link business key to the actual satellite business key. So we got one to many, and I'm going to leave the from my employee order link table to what will become my satellite. So there we go, one to many. Now I need to address my satellite because that doesn't look very good at the moment. I might also want to change, because I've spotted the order keys wrong here. So if I rename that to order key. So let's go into my satellite. Employee ID is going to be my business key, and then all the others are going to be my medium change satellites. Now we have what will become our satellite for employee. We've got an link key for the employee order, link table for employee order, and then we've got the order satellite. All the blue keys will become hubs tables, will generate hubs, and anything with reds in it will create link tables. So, and I've also updated my observation note. So all of these things could happen by a developer in a separate branch, or it could happen in the main branch. So if I commit this to Git now, so now the development branch is also progressed by one commit, and Ramesh's branch has also been progressed. So what I'm going to do now is just move over to switch branches. I'm going to switch to Ramesh's branch, which is, there we go, Panagal's progress. Click on OK, and then all the changes from that branch will be loaded down into my system, and I'll be able to interact.
I think it's also worth noting here, Simon, just when I'm in the same way that I didn't create a new version of the model, you didn't either. So we're still working on the same version of the model in 3D, just independently, and we're going to merge that back in later.
All of the changes that have been made are being made inside of Git, so we'll be able to track those changes through. And the next step for this is for me to assess your changes and then merge your change to the development branch, and that will, in essence, bring everything back together and help us move forward. Cool. Now we're uploading the models. Okay, so now red is carrying on. I'm going to let that do its thing and just jump into Wordscape 3D. So we can now see, if I go and have a look at the information, I'm in the right branch, and I'm on the latest commit. So if I jump into Ramesh's data vault design and display that, so yes, we got everything that Ramesh has done, and you can see the customer bill address and the address. I'm going to add in as the senior developer on here, training provided Ramesh with a walkthrough guide to building this object. Right, so I'm going to copy that and I'm going to pop it into the other note as well. So now we've made all those changes, I'm going to commit all the changes to it, and this will extract all of the changes into an XML file, move it up into Git, so we have everything done, and now we're all synchronized up. So I may now want to merge this into this whole branch. I might want to merge it. I can merge it and close it, or I can just close the branch. So this gives us the opportunity to say, right, I want to throw away my changes, they're not important. Or actually, these are really good. This is my feature branch and I need to merge it back into the development branch. And in essence, that's what Ramesh has done. Me as the senior developer, I can review his code and go, this is acceptable. Or Ramesh could perform this option himself. It really comes down to how you're going to work within your own company. We're going to close this branch, and in doing that, it's going to give us the option of what do we want to do. So we're selecting the Ramesh's branch and we're going to merge this into the development branch. Okay, so that's how it's going to work. And when we've done that, the process, once it's merged the branches together, we'll rebuild the repository based on the result of that merge. So what we're going to pick is, rather than closed branch will just disregard all of the changes to Ramesh's branch and disregard them and move us. We're going to merge and close. Okay, so what's now happened is those changes have been merged together in the Git repository. So Ramesh's additions have been merged into development. That's now been committed into the development branch. Ramesh's branch would have been closed down, okay, because all moved into the development branch, and the result of that merge is now being rebuilt onto my machine, so I can then move forward from here. It's always important to remember when you're doing these sorts of things, as in code for like a website or for an application, whenever there's been a change on the remote Git repository, all of the machines on all of the remote, so your laptops and all your developer machines, have to be synchronized. So at the same time as I'm doing this, Ramesh would be talking to me, going, "Yeah, okay, I can see that's happened," and then I'm going to do a pull and refresh or switch to the development branch. And the same process takes place on Ramesh's machine as it would mine. The existing repository would be cleared down, the new repository would be built, the changes would be imported and set up on his local machine. And then once that process is complete, we can carry on. Now the process of rebuilding 3D has taken place, we can inspect the data vault and look at all of the merges, all of the additional bits that have been added in. So if I just reorganize the design, you can see we have, let's make sure we got Ramesh's one first. So there's Ramesh, you put in the build customer address, and we got address down here as well. So as the additional items that Ramesh has done, and you can see the notes that I subsequently put on about providing Ramesh with walkthrough guides to build the objects, and the additional parts of order to employee and employee to employee order. So we've built that link out as well. So very quickly, between us both, Ramesh, we've used Warescape 3D to collaborate on a model that previously we may have had to go one at a time on, and we can use Git to help us build these separate bits of the model and incorporate them back in.
Just to summarize, so we've managed to do a few things just now. So we managed to pull the development branch down. We created a new branch for me. We both independently worked on the model. So I created my pieces, you created your pieces. I then was able to commit my changes back up, which then facilitated a peer review where you were then able to look at my branch, make changes as you needed to, and then once that was done, we were able to merge those changes back together. Fair summary?
Absolutely. And that's a fair summary, and I think most people who are listening to us will have done something similar to that in their working day life. Maybe not as straightforward as that, but and this kind of, from my perspective, this is just the tip of the iceberg. What we've shown now is how each of us, we could create collaboration within the design tool. But anything that's using Git, you will always be able to build pipelines on the top of that to be able to, screen metadata, check for problems. That's one of the things that we often help with people. It's like, okay, looking for good code, looking for bad code. We can create other pipelines that would automate designs to go between the tools. So if you want something to come out of 3D and go straight into red, maybe you don't want it to go into a developer environment. Maybe you want it to go into your main development environment. But you could hold everything locally and then use pipelines to go out and move things into your proper environment. I think what I'm trying to say here is a few ideas, but the options to automate your development pipeline are endless, and anything that you can think of right now that's taking a lot of time to achieve, you can use these pipelines to start speeding things up.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and I think, but more than that, just on top of what we've been seeing, we can really see the power of how those collaborations can come together. So, by having that individual sandbox type of a structure, what we're able to do is we're just creating an autonomous environment which creates safety again for all kinds of activities, not just for development, but we were demonstrating a potential use case for training, for instance, right? So I was the trainee, and you were showing me what to do in an environment which was that was parallel to the main development branch, so I wasn't necessarily affecting that work either. But if we wanted to prototype, or we just wanted to experiment and just kind of muck about and see what was going on, we could also do that in a separate environment based on the centralized model. And by doing that and having that kind of peer review process, what we're actually able to do is a couple of different things. So I guess the version control aspect of having Git sitting centrally, and managing what's being pulled, and managing the parallel development branches that we want to create, and managing the merge sequence and processing of those approvals back into a central model, means that master model is very, very well protected. So it doesn't create risk. It actually removes risk from the development environment and gives you, as the developer, a lot more flexibility to be sort of more audacious in what you want to try and do, right, without any potential risk to the main master. But once we have that master, the other thing with Git is that it gives us a much more atomic rollback capability, right? So previously, if you have a repository, if you're taking backups of that repository and restoring that repository, you can't just roll back a single model necessarily, but you would roll back the repository as a whole. So, having that capability of being able to roll back changes at a model level is also very, very powerful. The other thing that we saw was that, we saw that when we were working, we weren't creating new versions within 3D either, right? So within the model structure and the versioning structure, it created a lot more hygiene, right? So we didn't have that tiered structure of versions within 3D that we then need to okay, well, Ramesh did it this way at this particular point in time. Oh, that's redundant now. We need to take that out. All of that additional metadata that would essentially clog up the repository has been removed from the equation. And similarly, and I guess going back to the sandbox environment, if we're trying to upgrade 3D, let's say for example you've got your development branch, a new version of 3D's come out, and you want to actually just test that new version of 3D without upgrading everything for all of your developers, we can create another sandbox environment, upgrade on that environment, and test and make sure that everything is fine and dandy before we then roll that upgrade out to everyone else. But I think for me, that all of those components coming together creates a very, very articulate and very elegant solution for customers in managing their modeling environment as a whole and working together as teams.
Absolutely. And I think this is the collaboration piece, the thing I'm really passionate about, is making sure people can collaborate on models. And this is kind of the right way, the blue sky way of doing it, regardless, the tool we're showing you right now can do it, right? And this is what I think people need to have in their minds as a kind of blueprint of the way it should be done, what good looks like. Ramesh, before we go on to that, look, thank you very much for your time today in going through this. I appreciate all your feedback and input into this. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Simon.